Kumlan and Black Gemara, and this is a Chodesh Aleph Chodesh Adar. Aleph is Daf Chaf Amar Aleph. I'm continuing to learn about Avelis, even though Mishanichnas Adar Marbim Simcha, and actually we read Parshas Mishpatim. Ve'ele Mishpatim. It says in Sfarim that Ve'ele is Rosh Tevis Vav Aleph Lamed Hey Rosh Tevis La Yehudim Hoisa Oida V'Simcha. That Oida, which is Torah, brings simcha. So even though we're learning Moed Katan Avelis, it should always be the simcha. We should be zeichet to tefillas hametzim, so we don't have to learn any more about Avelis. Torah we learned. Torah we learned if kayayam kfiyas hamita shloshim regel. Remember we learned in our Mishnah that 3 days is the minimum that you have to keep for shiva. If you fulfilled the kfiyas hamita. Remember one of the things that you do on the island, one of the requirements for novel is to turn the bed over. I told you that the most of today we don't do that for a number of reasons that the guy might suspect that we're doing all kinds of witchcraft or strange things, and also our beds are different than those beds. So if you fulfill kfiyas hamita 3 days before Yom Tov, you don't have to continue after Yom Tov David Abelazar because Yom Tov comes along and cancels it. Chachamim say no, even 1 hour before Yom Tov, you complied with the laws of Avelis. That's it. Yom Tov canceled it. And I told you Shoachas doesn't even mean an hour; it could be a minute. So just taking your shoes off because of Avelis, you're already sat shiva. In fact, this is the argument. Bishamay says, you need a minimum of 3 days. Even 1 day. Even 1 day, even 1 moment. Rava says, halach is like Tana Didan. Rava, however, disputes this, and he says, halach is like our Mishnah, you need a minimum of 3 days. You need a minimum of 3 days. However, Ravina equal to Surah Paras. Ravina once came and he was by Surah the Paras. Amalei Rav Chaviva Ravina. Rav Chaviva said to Ravina, Hilchasamai, how do you rule? Amalei, he said, Afilu Yom Echad, Afilu Shoachas. We follow the view that even 1 moment is good enough like a Chachamim. Nothing Milsa Benai to have a discussion about Avelis, and the question was, okay, we now know how 30 days comes about. We learned from Nazir, but where does 7 days come? We know that 7 days. Mishnah, where does it come 7 days? I know Avelis is 7 days. So the machlekes of Avelis is Ma'atayim and Rabbanon. In fact, in Shulchan Aruch, Pascha is interesting, but it's just the Pascha that Avelis, the first day at least, is Ma'atayim. But how do you know Avelis is 7 days? You see what it says, that the Navi says that I am going to transform your Yom Tovim to mourning, and I'm going to make you, I'm going to punish you because of the way you behave. A Yom Tov is 7 days, right? Sukkot is 7 days. Kashmir says it's a separate Yom Tov. Pesach is 7 days, and I'm going to transform your Yom Tovim into Avelis. So now we know that an Oval is 7 days. So we have a question. We have a third Yom Tov called Shavuos. And we have a general rule to fast the meruba like to fast the mu'at to fast. You always take the smaller amount. So why don't we just make Avelis 1 day like Shavuos? Why don't we learn from Shavuos is 1 day? Says the Gemara, no. We taka sometimes have 1 day. 2 Yom Tovim are 7, so most Avelis are not 7. The 1 Yom Tov is 1, because there is 1 Avelis, that's 1. When is Avelis only 1 day? So we're going to introduce a concept called Shmua Kreiva Shmua Rechaker. If you heard about the passing of a member of your family within a certain amount of time, it's called a Shmua Kreiva. You have to start your Avelis then, and you do your Kriya. But if you heard it a long time after, that's called Shmua Rechaker, and then you only have Avelis for 1 day. And we'll see later that mixing a Kuli is even a shorter time than that. I know that if you heard it a long time after it happened, it's only 1 day. You see what it says about Fachti Chagechem le'Evo. The Ashkelon we find at Sedes the Ikra Chad Yom Chag. Shavuos is called a Chag 1 day, and so the Navi said, Amos said, I'm going to transform your Yom Tovim to Avelis. So there's an occasion where the whole entire Avelis is 1 day, and that's a Shmur Rechaker. We'll soon see how much time has to elapse before we consider it a Shmur Rechaker. And on which Avelim, on which people have passed away. Shmur Kreiva Neged Shiva 7 days, and the 30 day rule Shmur Rechaker Neged Yom Echad. But Shmur Rechaker is only 1 day. There's no shloshim. Eze Kreiva Veizel Rechaker. What's the definition? Kreiva is b'toich shloshim within 30 days, and Rechaker is la'achar shloshim after 30 days. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. And the Chachamim say, achas shmur kreiva, achas shmur lechoika, whether it's a shmur kreiva, whether it's a shmur lechoika, no heges, shivim b'shleishim. Rabbi Akiva says what we just said, shmur lechoika. He makes a distinction between the two. The Chachamim say, what's the difference? As soon as you heard it, that's the day of Avelis, and you have to now start your shiva and your 30 days. So who do we follow? Usually we follow the majority, but not in this case. Anywhere you find an argument of a single person and a multiple number of people, of course you always follow the rabbi, the majority, regardless, even if the majority are being machmed. Chutz mezu, this is the exception. So first of all, they're machmed. Second of all, the majority. Halacha ki Rabbi Akiva. Why should the halacha be like Rabbi Akiva? Shmuel said, when it comes to avelis, we generally follow those who are lenient, like we always follow Abba Shol, even though it's a lone opinion against all these other rabbis. Rabbi Chanina asked Shmuel Davu, he heard about his father. He heard about his father from Chazai many. A long time later. So the Gemara also came up a long time after his father's passing, he heard his father's passing. And this is after 30 days. So he went to Rav Chizda and he wanted to know, what should I do? Past 30 days, all it is Avelis one day. He heard the Ime, his mother passed to Bechazai, some reason or other from the city of Bechazai. They don't spread the news so fast. Azagam came before Rava. So this is a generation later. Rava was the son-in-law of Rav Chizda. Amalei said, Hari Amru, Shmur Rechaika Ein Nehegetz Ela Yom Echad. And he said that a Shmur Rechaika is only one day. Eisvel, that's a question that says, in a Braisa, when do we say that it's only one day? We're going to see later that the Torah says that a kohen, an ordinary kohen, a kohen heged has a mitzvah to go to the levaya to make himself impure for 7 relatives. So it says over here, and therefore we say that an aval also is tied and linked to that these 7 relatives you have to be an aval for. So it says over here, when do we say that a shmur lechaika you don't have to follow only the 5 meisid mitzvah, only 5 of these 7 relatives, but your parents is a different story. My father and mother even a year later. He said to him, no, that's a lone opinion, and we don't follow that. Halachically, we say that you don't have to keep more than 1 day, even for your own parents. Because the cases that we just said before, the 2 cases, one was for the father and one was for the mother. The time you learn, Maisa is a story. Mace Aviv Sharab Tzaddik, the father of Tzaddik passed away, begins in a city called Ginzik. They didn't want to notify him till 3 years later. Now, it could be this is the same Rav Tzaddik who fasted for 40 years, and therefore maybe for health reasons they didn't want to tell him. And this is very, very interesting. And he came, and Vishal, he asked, who was the Rav at that time? Elisha ben Avu. We're going to learn about him in Masechet Chagiga, how he betrayed everything in Yiddishkeit and he became an apokrifos. And the only thing we have is Pirkei Avos, where he said, that you should learn when you're young, not wait till you're old. And here we have a halacha from Elisha ben Avur. We don't have halachas in Shas from Elisha ben Avur. This is fascinating. So, and in fact, other people have a different gears here because we have no halachas from Elisha ben Avur. And what our Gemara quoted. But here, it's actually just telling you a story, what happened at that time. So in Elisha ben Avur, and it wasn't on him alone. It says, the Skenia Shema, and the elders that were with him. That means not only his contemporaries, not only his peers, but the elders that were with him. So we're not talking about a mayor who was younger than him, we're talking about the older people. Must have been doing Yisrael. But Amru, and they all ruled by your parents, no yeshiva, v'shloishim. But what do we see from here? It was a lone opinion. The majority hold that no difference. All 7 relatives, Shmur lechaika, 1 day. When the son of Achia passed away because in exile, Yoshev all of Shiva Shloishim. We have another person of Achia who sat Shiva and Shloishim. And the Gemara wants to know who Rav Achia is. The Gemara first thinks that Rav Achia, he must be Rav Chia. So they say, you're telling us Rav Chia holds that a Shmur lechaika, you got to sit 7 as Shiva and Shloishim? Well, that's the question. Ain't it not? So we learned at the beginning of Psachim. Rav, and we also learned before, Rav, then we had the Rabba Bar Bachana, and we had that Rav Chia went and taught in the marketplace to his 2 nephews. One was to Rav, and one was Rabba Bachana. And what's so unique about Rav was that the Rav was a nephew from his father and his mother from Rav Chia. Rav Chia's half-sister from his mother's side was the mother of Rav, and Rav Chia's half-brother from the father's side was Rav's father. So the Rav's father and Rav's mother were not related to each other at all. They both had a common half-brother. which was Rab Chia. So Rabbi Rabba, Achva de Rabbi Chia, Rab, the nephew of Chia, Rabbi Chia was also the nephew from his sister, from his mother's side. Kisogos, when he went to visit Rabbi Chia, who was in Israel, Amalei said, Rabbi Chia wanted to know, Abba Kaim, is my father alive? Now there are many different shots, actually at least 3, how to learn shot. So according to some, Rav Chia was actually asking Rav about what do you call it? About his own parents, and Rav was answering about his own parents. And therefore it follows our Gemara, we're talking about parents. And others say he was talking about the Rav's parents. You want to know whether they're still alive. Amalei Abba Kayim, Amalei Ima Kayemis. He says, now there's 2 ways of learning. Either he's saying a statement, my mother's alive, not answering his question, so you should understand by inference that I don't want to talk about my father, he passed away. Or he's saying back to the question, why are you asking about my father? Why aren't you asking about my mother? And Amalei, he said, fine, Ima Kayem, is his mother alive? Amalei, Abba Kain, did I answer you about my father? You're already jumping to my mother. So you realize straight away what's going on, and we don't want to be a beer of bad news. Amalei the Shmaya, he said right away to his servant, so he said to the servant, remove my shoes, I want you to carry my things with me to the Beis HaMerchetz. In other words, he's doing a public display, so people should learn what the rules of what do you call it, of Shmur Chayk is. Shmamna Tlach, 3 things. Shmamna Oval also in the sandal. Oval is forbidden to wear shoes. He told him to remove his shoes. Shmamina Shmur Chayk. Shmur Chayk is only one day. Shmamina Mixayim Kikulay. And for me to learn out, Mixayim Kikulay. It's been hard to understand. If we're talking about Rav's father, who was Rab Chia's brother and sister, we just said a minute ago that only for your own parents do you, Shmur Chayk, you have to follow Shiva and Shloshim. But when it comes to your brother and sister, you don't have to follow Shiva and Shloshim. So, what do you call it? So what's the Gemara's question? The Gemara's question is because Rabbi Chaya was actually sitting out Avelis not for his father or mother, it's for his son. His son is one of the other 5. And yet he followed Shiva and Shloshim. So we're saying, here's his brother and sister who are the same like a son. And he did not sit Shiva Shloshim. So who's this Rabbi Chia? Says Gemara, you're right. Rabbi Chia L'chud, Rabbi Chia L'chud, they're 2 different people. So Shmur Chayk is only one day, and in one day is only part. According to many poskim, even just at night, part is enough. He heard, let's say, Shmur Krayva on Yom Tov, very interesting shaila. What happens? You heard day number 30 was Shmini Atzeres. And you heard in Israel, and you heard that your close relative passed away. So when you can start Avelim, which is Mitzvah Yom Tov, it's day number 31. It falls now on the category of Shmur Chayk. But you heard about it as a Shmur Krayva, but you couldn't start your Avelis. What do you do now? So he said, Shama Shmur Krayva Beregel, you heard it on Yom Tov. Ula Mitzvah Regel, but only on Mitzvah Yom Tov. Nasa, it became Chayk. Oile Loi, they Regel Yom Echad. He said, all you have to follow is one day. It's considered as if you heard when you can have Shiva, which is day number 31. And therefore, it's only one day. So now the Yom Tov is considered as if you didn't hear it because you couldn't do any Shiva. And therefore, 30 days expired before you heard it. Talking about the Mikisa, what happened? The same thing. You heard a Shmur Krayv on Shabbos, day number 30. We don't look at Shabbos, we look at when you were able to sit Shiva. It was day number 31. So you ask the question. Now you have only Yom Echad, but do you take Kriya? Do you take Kriya? So was this day Yom Echad is like real Shiva, and by Shiva you take Kriya, or this is more like a token measure, and there's no Kriya? Money says, since there's no Shiva here, it's only one day, so it's a token measure, there's no Kriya. No Kriya. This one day encapsulates all 7, and therefore you need Kriya. Money understand. According to me, I say, very simple what I'm saying. There's no Shiva, it's only one day. It's more like a token measure, therefore there's no Kriya. You say Kriya, below Shiva Mika. Where do you find Kriya if there's no Shiva following? Says the Gemara. In other words, he said, you think that one day encapsulates 7? No, it isn't. There's no thing as one day encapsulating 7. One day is one day, which means it's only a token measure. Where does Kriya come in? Says the Gemara. Who said there's a link between Kriya and Shiva? The Gemara, but Tani didn't we learn Isay, who was the Avur de Rab Zayda, who happened to be the father of Zayda, or the others say Achur de Rab Zayda, was the brother of Zayda. Kam made Rab Zayda discussed with his brother or his son Rab Zayda. What happened? You don't own the shirt to do kriya. And you didn't have it before the shiva, but in the middle of the shiva, somebody, you're wearing clothes, but it wasn't yours. Or it was all tattered, so you couldn't make another kriya. You still do kriya even after shiva. What do we see? What do you call? Sorry. During the shiva, you kriya. But after shiva, ain't no kriya. After shiva, you don't do kriya. You don't do kriya. So we see that kriya is that's what the father asked, or the brother asked of Zayda. On the Zayda is responding. When you write the 5 relatives, the further 5 relatives, they're the ones you write that you don't do kriya, but there's no shiva. Your parents, even after the shiva, you take kriya. What does he clearly from here? That kriya is not linked to shiva. Says the Gemara, no, you misunderstood. You know why you have to take kriya after shiva? It's not din avelis. It's out of respect to your parents. So therefore, actually, when you hear a shmur chayke as well, so many pastors say out of respect to your parents, you should do kriya, but not else avelis, because there's no avelis, no shiva. And if for the other 5 mason you don't, but your parents, you do that to show covet to them. Now we're going to say, who do you have to sit shiva for? Any member of the family that it's written in Parshas Koyin, Parshas Emer, should Koyin mitamela, there's a mitzvah for Koyin to go to their levaya. Oval misabel alein, so too an oval has to sit and mourn. They go, hey, Ishta, your wife, Aviva, Imay, your father, your mother, Echava, Chaysa, your brother, your sister, B'nai Biti, your son and daughter. These are the 7 relatives. Haysifu alein, the rabbis added on. Because everything is paternal. The Rabbanan added on even maternal. Your brother or your sister, who's not married yet, but they're maternal, the Rabbanan added on. The fact that we say added on sounds like that those are Mahatayra and these are Midrabbanan. Remember I told you some Rishonim hold that Avelis is Mahatayra. Those Rishonim hold that Avelis is Rabbanan say initially the Rabbanan just based themselves on the Torah by a Kohen. Then the Rabbanan later on added another layer. What about Achayse Nusur? The Torah says clearly that a married sister is taken care by her husband, but as Rabban added, a married sister, whether your father, your mother, also you still available. Kishem shemis abel alein, kach mis abel ashniyim shalahem. Kiva holds that if one of the 7 relatives that you have to mourn for is sitting in mourning for a close relative of theirs, like their son or their father, then you have to sit and mourn for them as well. That's what the Kiva holds. Shimon Elazar says, no, the only ones that you do is for a grandson and a grandfather. If your son is sitting Shiva, then you have to sit Shiva with him for your grandson. And if your father, Nachman is sitting Shiva for his father, you sit with him. That's it. Now, Chachamim say, Chachamim say, any of the 7 members of the family that you have to mourn for, if they're state of mourning, you have to mourn with them. Which sounds like exactly a Tanakama. Because Rabbi Shimon Elazar just it's limited to your grandfather and grandson. Tanakama said to anyone that you're mourning, if they're mourning for somebody else. Chacham said the same thing. Says you have to be together in the house at the same time. The Tanakama doesn't need those. If your father lives in another country, you still have to be in a state of mourning. The Chachamim say no. You say no. If your father and you are together, and if your father is sitting in a state of mourning, then you also mourn. But if your father is not there, you don't have to. In front of her, let's say in front of your wife. If your wife is sitting in mourning, you also have to mourn only if you're there with her. If you're not there with her, like you don't have to conduct any avelis. Maruka, his father-in-law passed away, so his wife was sitting Shiva. He wanted to sit Shiva and Shleishim because his wife was sitting. He thought you have to be exact like her. Oh, Rav Hunda happened to go inside. Ashli found him. He said to him, "Nice boys, you missed the meal. The Sudas Havra, the first meal that you give to an Abel, or that day, all the meals that's given by somebody else. Is that what you miss? You want that meal over there?" In other words, what you have to be able. The only time that you have to mourn for your wife, family, is your father-in-law and your mother-in-law. If she's sitting and mourning her parents, you have to mourn with her. Now, this is very interesting because The halacha is the Gemara that if his wife is mourning, you have to mourn with her. Okay, when you're there. How come we don't do that today? So the Ramah says if the wife is moichel, or the other way around, the husband saying, listen, the wife has to mourn with him. If the husband is moichel, then it's moichel. So the Ramah says that today it's automatically assumed that everyone is moichel, and therefore you don't mourn. And in fact, he says if somebody wants to be machmer and mourn with his wife or with a husband, it's merze kiyoyla. It looks like you're being arrogant. Then the Ramah says, however, some people have a custom that till Shabbos and after Shabbos, you maybe don't wash yourself. You do something that's a little bit different, so a sign of mourning. But it seems to the Ramah then that even that he doesn't really approve of. But the Gemara rules that you have to be sympathetic to your wife and to mourn. Interesting, because the Shulchan Aruch talks about if there might be a mitzvah kibbut of aim extending also to a father-in-law and a mother-in-law. So maybe that's why the mourning comes in for that. The time we learn, Misha Meis Chama, if your father-in-law died, in the morning you're not allowed to force it to go ahead and to put on all kinds of makeup and so on to look beautiful for you. What you should do is turn the bed over as well, which is a sign of mourning. Conduct yourself in a same thing if her husband's father or mother passed away. She shouldn't go ahead there and just behave as if there's no mourning. She turns her bed over, and she does availus. Even though you're not allowed to stop the wife when you say the morning. But then, nevertheless, other duties that a wife, let's say, did for her husband, she can continue, like filling up, diluting the wine with water, make his bed, and to bathe, wash his hands and face. Here it says that she's allowed to make a bed. And before we said you turn the bed over. What do you mean make the bed? What do you mean husband? We just said a husband has to behave together with his wife. That means he turns the bed over. And here you tell me, I said that the wife makes the bed for the husband. And it must be. Why is the wife mourning? Sometimes when she mourns, the husband has to join her, sometimes not. So you say when it comes to the father-in-law, the mother-in-law, he has to join her, and therefore all other relatives, he doesn't have to. Shmam, good proof. Time will be learned. When we say that he has to out of honor, so interesting. The Gemara clearly says the reason why you have to sit up with your wife is als covered of your wife. So therefore, you have to know the parents. It doesn't say because covered of your father-in-law, your mother-in-law. It says covered of your wife, and since she's in the state of mourning, you should join her and feel her pain. Interesting. Covered Ishta. Amema's grandson passed away. He tore his clothes, like we said before, according to the opinion that your grandfather or your grandson. Or because his son was sitting shivas, he joined the son. Then his son came in, he again tore in front of his son. He remembered something in the Miyusha that he was sitting when he grew it, that he tore his clothes while he was sitting. He stood up, caught a moment, and he tore his clothes again. 3 times he tore kriya for his grandson. Who told you that you have to stand up? What do you call it? Why? First of all, Tracy wants to know why did he have to tear his clothes again? He raised kriya. So what if his son came in? So Tracy says maybe we're just trying to teach him the halacha that you have to tear kriya for a grandson as well, and that's why he did that to show that. What do you call it? Or his son made the father realize he made a mistake. Amema ripped the clothes when he was sitting. His son came in and he ripped his clothes when he was standing. So maybe, said if so, after also I made a mistake. And therefore he had to tear it again. So therefore all he did was he tore it twice, not 3 times. Anyhow, you have to do standing. The Chsiv, it says, Ayakim Eev stood up, Ayikras Meila, he ripped his Eev stood up when what do you call it? And he shaved his head and he fell down the ground and he bent down. When he heard the terrible news. And so, if so, so this is Eev. We heard of the terrible news happening to his family. So, so you tell me, because it says in the pasuk that Eev stood up, there's a raya that you have to tear clear when you stand up. Because right? Eev stood up and he ripped his clothing, his mantle. So that's how you want to learn. That's the question. By the Yavam, it says by the woman, if the brothers want to marry, it says, but she stands up and says, the man stands up and says, they don't want to take him. So how come there isn't a din that by a Yavam he has to stand up and say, I don't want to marry my sister-in-law? It doesn't make a difference whether he's sitting or standing or bent over. In all of them, leaning, in all of them, it's the same thing. So Amalei said to him difference. Hasam like Ksiv by Yamid by Yemer, Haksiv by Yakum. Over here it says by Yak, he was sitting, he stood up in order to tear. So it's clear that he had to stand up to rip. Over there it says Vi Amad Amad. Don't say Vi Yamad, he should stand up. It says Vi Amad Amad, which is an expression, he stood up and said, not because you're particular that he has to stand up. It's just an expression, a way of speaking, manner of speaking. Said, how do you know the clear shimum and how you know the clear that is standing? It says Vayakum Iyo Vayikra. Says the Gemara, how do you know maybe he did it on his own volition. Maybe he wanted to be more machman. How do you know that's halacha? Says the Gemara, in fact, we have to say that he was doing something extra. He didn't do it halacha. There's another part. It's like Yoga the Rosh, he shaved his head. First of all, a noble shouldn't shave. He shaved his head. So what are you going to say? Therefore, we should learn from that. So you're right. You can't learn from Iyuv Elamahachim. It says by David Melech, he was told first that Absalom killed out all his kids, all his siblings. By Yokam Hamelech, Vayikin Begadav. He stood up. It turned out later that Absalom only killed Amnon. But in the beginning, David thought that Absalom wiped out his whole family. So he stood up and he rent his clothes. So it says clearly he stood up. So you want again, but you say David, maybe he's just being machmed. I'll prove it to you. It says in the passage, what else did David Melech do? It says that by Yishkav Arza that he went to lie down on the ground. Now you don't have to lie down on the ground. So you have to do it? Of course not. But Tanya, we learned you shouldn't lie down on the ground. It says there, if you sat on a bed while you're in an oval, or a kiss on a normal chair, or a yodaina on a big mortar, or a gedola, a large one, or a karka, if you're lying on the ground, be cool in the other of us, you haven't filled your mitzvah shira, because we want you dafka to sit on an overturned bed, which shows a sign of mourning. So he didn't fulfill the mitzvah of kriyas mitzvah. So he can't. But yet he lied on the ground. So obviously you can't learn from David Melech because he rents his clothes. He lied on the ground as well, which we know is not the right thing to do. When it says that he lied on the ground, doesn't mean literally that he lied on the ground. It means he turned the bed over, which is much lower than usual, and therefore it's as if he lied. He fulfilled the mitzvah of kriyas mitzvah. And that's why we could learn. He did everything right. He didn't do anything extra, exactly right. And therefore, if it said that he rent his clothes, Zanai, that's what we have to do. Okay, we will stop over here.